So I've been a marketing EIR for like forever, years. And the most common question I get is some version of, okay, this is my startup, this is what I do, and how should I market it? And usually I get even more specific question than that, where people say, you know what, I'm trying to decide whether or not we should buy AdWords, or I'm trying to decide whether or not we should do Facebook ads. And it's frustrating for me because that's an impossible question for me to answer. And so asking me how should I market my startup is a bit like asking me where should I go buy shoes, which is another question I get, right, from women once in a while. Hey, where do you buy shoes? Where do you go buy shoes? The answer I give you is going to be based on a bunch of assumptions. I'm going to assume your style's like my style. I'm going to assume your budget's like my budget. I'm going to assume something about what do you want to do with the shoes, and it's probably, I might say, oh, where you go buy shoes? I've got this guy and he works at Holtz. And he will recommend you an amazing pair of shoes. And you'll say, geez, I don't know, Holtz, that sounds kind of expensive. And I'll say, oh, well, what's your budget? And then I give you a different answer. Or you might say, well, actually, I'm going hiking, and I don't think Holtz is going to sell me hiking shoes. Or go, oh, geez, well, you should have told me you were going hiking. Now that I know you're going hiking, I'm going to recommend you a completely different place. How you market your startup, like the advice you get to questions like that is generally going to be really, really, really bad. And I've seen people try to answer that question, but how they'll answer it is they'll make a bunch of assumptions. So they'll assume who your target market is and how they behave. They'll make assumptions about your sales process. They'll make assumptions about who you compete with and what the competitive alternatives are. And so, can we pause for a second on this? And so, so the advice you get is going to be kind of probably pretty lousy because they're going to make a bunch of assumptions. You don't know what assumptions they're making. To make it even worse, the word marketing in itself is super problematic. So if you say, how should I market my startup? The word marketing could mean one of like a dozen things. So sometimes when people say marketing, they think branding. Sometimes they think PR. Sometimes they think lead generation. Sometimes it's messaging. Sometimes it's sales support if you're talking about B2B. And so all those things sort of go together to kind of guarantee that the advice you get about marketing is going to be bad. And then you have this problem, particularly with marketers, have you ever heard this expression, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail? This is particularly true of marketers. So particularly of marketers that haven't run marketing at a startup. So if you talk to somebody who says, oh, I was in the marketing group at Microsoft, the first question you should ask is, what part of the marketing group at Microsoft? Because at big companies, the roles get really, really, really granular. So somebody who's working at Microsoft will only work on one piece. And so if they worked in PR, what they'll tell you is PR solves everything. Let me tell you how any problem you have, PR can solve it. If they're a branding person, a lot of folks you'll see come through here come from agencies, and the agencies are very focused on PR branding. And so again, if you say, oh, if you're asking a branding person what they should do, they'll say, oh, well, branding will solve everything. So this gets to a bit of me and the advice I'm going to give you and why my advice is probably crappy. And so if you look at me and my background, I've done a bit of everything in terms of branding, PR, whatever. Because if you run marketing at a startup, you have to touch on a bunch of those things. But almost all my startups have been B2B for starters. So the advice I give you is going to be very B2B focused. And you guys that are running the B2C things, my advice was probably pretty terrible. In fact, most folks that pitch me a B2B startup, the first thing I do is I advise them to take their idea and sell it to businesses instead. Because I'm super wired that way. I fundamentally don't believe B2C startups make money. It's like in my gut. And so if you come and ask me, I'll say, that's fantastic. Why aren't you selling it to businesses? And literally anybody with a B2C thing, that's what I end up telling them. It's terrible advice. It's obviously not true, yet I give it all the time. So these are all my biases, right? I think there's only money to be made in B2B. I kind of don't believe in B2C. I do think there's fundamental principles of marketing that apply to both, which is what I'm going to get to here in a second. But I've mainly worked with complex sales cycles where you've got a sales team, actually usually inside sales and outside sales. So I'm biased to that. That's how I think sales gets done, at least a big deal. All my teams have been very lead generation and revenue focused. And so when folks come and talk to me about the tactics they're doing for awareness, in B2B that doesn't matter all that much. And so I will discount those things. And if you ask me, should I be doing awareness stuff? I'm likely to say no, because that's not where I come from. I don't think branding's all that important. I think PR is okay, but only in certain situations. I think most things that you can't measure are a complete waste of marketing budget, and you shouldn't do them. And I'm also pretty sure that bigger budgets generally create more problems than they solve. And so those are kind of my biases coming into it. And so I recognize this in myself, right? So people come and they ask me for advice as the EIR, and they say, April, can you please advise me on this thing? And I have this B2C thing, whatever. And I sit there and go, I'm actually not sure I can teach you anything about how to market your startup. So I got noodling about this for a while because I started to think maybe I should just stop talking to companies that don't do this stuff because I don't have any good advice to give. And then I started thinking, well, maybe there's a higher order thing I could teach people, which is this underlying marketing fundamentals thing that could apply to everything. And so this is my attempt at doing that. We'll see if it works. So in my opinion, in marketing, there are easy things to do and hard things to do. These are the easy things. Easy things are things that Google can answer for you. So if you say, how do I run Facebook ads? I'm like, don't ask me. There are 1,000 Facebook ads experts that are writing the ultimate guide to running Facebook ads. There's 1,000 of these. Literally, you can Google any of these things. How do I get more traffic to my site? How do I improve SEO? How do I get more followers on social media? Literally, these are all previously solved problems. None of these things are hard. They're so easy that if you Google ultimate guide to any of these things, there will be 1,000 people that are super smart who have sat around thinking about nothing except how to solve this problem for their entire careers. And so these are easy things. The problem is there's all these super hard things that Google absolutely cannot answer for you. And so if you come and say, what is the best way to reach my target audience? Google can't answer that for you. How do I tailor these tactics? Yeah, I get how to run Facebook ads, but my people are weird. They look like this, they do these things, they buy this way. How do I run Facebook ads for my people? Well, Google can't answer that for you. Are there better ways for me to reach my audience than the tactics I'm doing right now? So, if you're saying, well, I'm running trade shows and those seem to be okay, are trade shows the best thing for me, given this is my audience and this is what I'm trying to do and these are the people I'm trying to sign up? Google cannot answer this for you. I can't answer it for you. But what I can do is teach you a way to figure it out, which I'm going to attempt to do in this. So, so I wanted to give you an example just to kind of drive that home. So I got brought in by the venture capitalists actually that made an investment in a late stage startup. Like these guys were doing maybe 20 million revenue. And I got hired as the VP marketing. It was kind of a long story, but there was a feeling that the marketing was kind of messed up in this place. And they had lost their head of marketing and they had attempted to hire a new head of marketing. And every marketer that came in and interviewed for the job kind of looked at the marketing they were doing and said, oh, this is a train wreck, and ran screaming, and they couldn't hire one. And so I knew the VCs and they said, could you come in just as a contract and just kind of look at this and see if you could spiff it up? Sure. So I go in and I sit down, and I know nothing about their business or anything. And so I sit down with the CEO and I said, okay, who do you sell to? And he says, Fortune 500 companies. What I need you to do, April, is to build me a marketing plan that sells our stuff to Fortune 500 companies. I'm like, just Fortune 500 companies? Yes, April, just Fortune 500 companies. Okay. So then I go and I sit down with the head of development. So, okay, what is it you guys do? And he says, well, it's kind of complicated. We have this thing for business analysts, and it allows them to run a better software development plan if they're building software. And it's kind of like project management, only it's more complicated than that. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So your end users are business analysts. Yeah, business analysts. So do all Fortune 500 companies have business analysts? Yeah, sort of. Like if I'm a mining company, I don't think I write any software. Do I have business analysts? No, you don't. Okay, so natural resources don't. Well, what about if I'm a software company and all I do is build software? Because I worked at IBM and I never saw anything that looks like your thing. So do you sell to them? No, not tech companies. They do it different. So if you're a tech company, not that. Okay, so now I got Fortune 500 minus natural resources minus tech companies. All right. So, but wait a second. What if I wasn't a Fortune 500 company, but I did have a lot of business analysts and we did this thing? Would I sell to them? Yeah, the guy says. Okay, so cripes. Fortune 500 company has nothing to do with it. Like, so what I'm getting from the folks is there's this segmentation, figure out how to write me a plan for Fortune 500 companies, but what I'm hearing is this completely different thing. So then you get into it and you say, okay, well, who have we got? So I pull up the customer database and they're making millions of revenue. So here's all my customers. And yeah, there's some Fortune 500 in there, but there's lots of little guys and lots of whatever. And I'm like, what is the common factor across all these guys? And I sit down with head of sales. So I'm looking at all these companies and some are really big and some are really small. So obviously company size isn't the thing. How do you decide who you pitch to? And he says, well, we sell software for business analysts, so if they have a lot of business analysts, then they're a good one for me to sell to. Okay, why do you need a lot of business analysts? He says, well, if you're writing a lot of internal software. Okay, those are like just a lot? Like, how do you measure that? And he says, well, actually, one of the things a business analyst does is it helps you manage software teams better. And he says, one of the great things we do is if your teams are distributed, then it's really good at it. Oh, like you mean if you outsource all your development to India or you acquired some companies to do software, then it would be good. Yes, he says. Then I go and I say, okay, I'm going to make like 30 customer calls. So I call 30 customers. Hey, it's amazing you have this thing. What do you do with it? And they literally fall into two camps. There's one camp. We got software development teams all over the world. We got some folks in India and China. We have some folks that are offshore somewhere else, and we're managing these big projects, and I need this thing to manage that. Okay, offshore development, got it. The other camp is we're a company that buys lots of little companies, and then we have to coordinate all these little companies and projects across them, and that's how we do it. So the segmentation is actually what I'm trying to build a marketing campaign for is folks that have outsourced development and folks that do lots of acquisitions. Now, think about that. I'm the head of marketing. If I was to sit down and you were to say, April, build me a marketing campaign that hit Fortune 500 companies, what would I do? I don't know, what do Fortune 500 companies, like what do they read? Where do they get their information about stuff? I don't know, maybe I'd take out a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Like it sucks. I don't even know how to build a campaign for that. But if you said, build me a campaign for people that do outsourced development, crap, man, there's conferences for people like that. There are publications that they read. There are lawyers that will help you do contracts just for that. Same deal with mergers and acquisitions. Folks that are doing lots of mergers and acquisitions, there was literally a conference called Mergers and Acquisitions World 2009 or whenever that was. And so if you were to ask me, how do I get in front of people that are doing lots of mergers and acquisitions? How do I get in front of people that are doing lots of that? That I can build a campaign for, because I can step back and say, where do these people learn about stuff? What do they read? Where do they hang out? What do they do? I can build a campaign for that. So here's the problem that you get into. most of the time when you're a startup and you don't know anything about marketing, this is how you build a campaign. So, and I call this cycle of marketing meh. So it's not terrible, but it's not great. Sometimes you get lucky and this works out. Most of the time it doesn't. And so here's what you start. It starts with what I call the marketing fashion assessment. So you say, all right, I run a platform for helping people, figure out their finances or something. And there's other products out there that are kind of similar to that. And I'm probably going to market my stuff the same way they market their stuff, because it's more or less the same people, right? Or whatever. And they seem like smart guys and they have 90 million VC. So I'll go look at what they're doing and I'll look at their tactics and I'll start there. That's what I mean by fashion assessment. What's good today? Oh, Facebook ads. Everyone else is running them. Maybe I'll run those. So I run them, and then that's how I select my tactics. And then I'll go run them and I'll measure whether or not they worked. And if they don't, then I might try to make them work a little better. But generally what I'll do is I'll just chuck it and I'll go back up here to the fashion assessment and try something else. And again, I'll look at what everybody else is doing. And that sometimes actually works pretty good. But a lot of times the results of this are just kind of, it's just okay. And the reason it's just okay is because you're not actually tracking or testing any assumptions about your market, about how they buy, about your value proposition, nothing. What you're testing to see is that thing that my competitor does, am I lucky and it works for me too? No? If it doesn't, I have no idea why. Right? If it does, I have no idea why. I'm just lucky. And I'll say, I'm a genius. That's why it worked, because I'm so damn smart, because I looked at what they did and that looked good, and then I did it too, and that's fantastic. The real problem in this is, I call this the golf problem. All tactics are equally good until tested. So I don't actually know how to stack rank tactics. So let's say I look at all my competitors and I come up with a list of 20 tactics. Which one should I try first? I don't know. They're all good until I test them and they fail. And so where this one got me, the reason I call this the golf problem, is that early in my career I was VP marketing for a startup. And I had this head of sales who, we were selling to CIOs at kind of mid-sized companies. And it was this sort of really technical data integration thing that we were selling. Anyways, my head of sales comes to me and I'm like second week on the job and I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. He comes in and he goes, glad you're here. You know what we need to do? We need to run a golf tournament. And I'm like, why? And he says, well, because it works. Golf tournaments work. You know why they work? I'm going to do foursomes, and I'm going to put one existing customer, and I'm going to put them together with 3 prospects, and they're stuck on the golf course together for 3 hours. We're going to close millions of business. Golf thing. And me, I'm sitting there, I'm like, creeps, man, like we're digital marketing, like I got $1 million worth of AdWords stuff running, I got all this other thing. This guy wants me to do a golf tournament, but I literally had nothing, I had nothing to argue back to him. I said, well, I don't think that's going to work. He said, what do you know? Why not? Because do our folks even golf? Oh, I golf with them all the time. Our customers totally golf. They're golfers. They're big golfers. Got anything else? Right? And so basically everything's good until you test it. And if I don't have any sort of reason why I picked my tactics other than just, someone else did it, then his opinion's just as good as mine until I test it. Now, you know how much it costs to run a golf tournament? It's expensive. It's like $70,000. I looked into it. We were going to do it at just that one up in Markham, I forget what it's called. And you wanted to run this big thing, $70,000 was like a significant chunk of my quarterly budget. That's a really expensive test. I don't know, so I'm gonna have to shut off all these other things that I know work. And he's like, oh, but this will work better. Trust me, April, it'll work better. And I don't have anything like if I'm not basing this on anything other than fashion, then my opinion, his opinion's better than mine. I'm 2 weeks into the job. He's been there 3 years. He probably knows better than I do. So should I run the golf tournament? I don't know. And then the last thing is, there is no relationship or consistency between the tactics. So because I'm just doing, random selection of random tactics that I find from poking around other people's sites, the tactics themselves don't have any relationship to each other. Now, this doesn't feel like a problem until you've seen what an integrated campaign looks like, and that is a problem, right? So it means that each of your tactics are happening in isolation, and there's no chance for these things to impact each other, which is kind of an advanced marketing concept. But even if you don't understand that, this is bad. It's basically what that is. And so this is my problem, right? So I caught myself in the middle of this going, man, I don't even know how to counter this. There's gotta be a better way than this. Now, I graduated from systems design engineering, and so if engineering taught me anything, it's that you need to build a model. And if I have crappy inputs to my system, then the whole thing is gonna be crappy. Everything that comes out is gonna be crappy. So I thought, okay, there's got to be a way for me to build a model, and the model should give me a smarter way to do inputs. There should be inputs into this thing that look better than just, let's just guess based on what everyone else is doing. And so, in my opinion, and I believe this works, and this is my experience talking, so again, take it with a grain of salt. These are the inputs to the model. First, you have to figure out who your best customers are. Then you have to figure out how they view your market and solutions within your market or alternatives to you, and then how they like to buy. Those are the three inputs. If you know these three things, then you can figure out what tactics are most likely to win, and this will always beat a market fashion assessment, always. Always. And so I'm going to go into each of these three things. And and I'm assuming I'll share slides with you guys later. Since these slides are so lo-fi and they're just text, it's kind of requires me to share them with you. So the first one is customers. So when I say your best customer, this is important as a startup to understand this. So it's not any customer. So depending on what your solution is, there could be an extraordinarily wide variety of customers that may want to buy your stuff. And if you cornered them in a room or had them in your foursome at a golf tournament, you might, over the course of 4 hours, be able to beat them into submission. But they say, fine, uncle, I'll buy your crap. But this is not everybody. This is your best customer. So this is the people that are the most enthusiastic about your solution. They're like the people when you pitch them this thing, they're like, I love that. I gotta have that now. They get really excited and agitated. They're the ones that are the easiest for you to explain who it is. Like you'll find some customers you pitch and they'll be like, oh, dude, I don't get it. But explain it to me again. And you have to do it like 4 times. Some customers will be like, oh no, I get you. They're completing your sentences, they're jumping ahead of you. Like these people intuitively get what you're all about. When you're selling them, they don't say, oh, I'd buy it if it was $5 a month, but 10. No, I wouldn't do 10. Like these people are like, take my money, like take it now. They're so excited. They never ask for a discount. They make purchase decisions quickly. So they don't sit there and say, yeah, it sounds kind of cool. Come back next week and pitch me again, right? Or yeah, maybe let's talk to my boss. Let's bring my boss in, we'll talk about it again. These folks are like, this is amazing. Let's figure out how to get this bought now. These are the folks that almost never churn on you. Like they come in, they put up with all your crappy bugs, they live through your outages, all this stuff, and they still don't leave you. And they're also the people that frequently recommend you to other people or people like them. Now, if you have a lot of customers, you can look at who you've already closed and try to find the patterns. So, and again, this is easier if you're selling to small businesses, maybe you've got lots of customers signed up, or if you're B2C, although I know nothing about B2C, so don't listen to me when I talk about that. But if you have lots of customers, you can sometimes figure this out by looking at who you've got already. And you can start looking at, what industry are they in? What size of company are they? What was the initial point of contact? Who made the final purchase decision? What was the purchase trigger? What was the value they're trying to get out of your solution? And you'll start seeing the patterns. So the example I used earlier, where I called 30 customers and had a conversation with them, the patterns were clear, right? Our best customers fall into these two categories. And, oh, by the way, that has nothing to do with company size. And so what you're looking for is, if I had a sales rep and I told my sales rep, go after these 5 customers, how would I identify the 5 that your rep is most likely to close? Now, if you have lots of customers, you can go in and do this and try to figure it out. And I highly recommend getting folks on the phone and having a conversation with them. What was your pain? Why did you decide you needed to solve it? How were you solving the problem before? Like customer discovery stuff. If you don't have customers, or you don't have enough customers to see the pattern, sometimes what you'll get, I joined this company once where the pattern, we only had 4 customers, and the pattern was the CEO knows my CEO. That was literally the pattern, which is no pattern, right? This is no pattern. We had exhausted that, so now we have 4 customers, and my CEO didn't know anybody else to sell to, and now we're done with that segment, and now we're on to other segments. So, that was a stupid pattern, and I got nothing out of those conversations. So I had to go into this, which is, I'm going to make a hypothesis about who my best customers are. So based on what I know about my solution and the pain that it solves, who feels the pain the most? And what is it about them that they feel the pain the most? Who's most likely to pay to fix it? Sometimes you've got customers that feel to pay the most, but they're broke, or for whatever reason, they're just never going to buy. So they don't count. We don't care about them because we want to get paid unless we're B2C and you don't care about revenue, and I don't understand how your business works. But who's most likely to pay for it is important. And then the last thing is you need to get as specific as you can. So again, that's my Fortune 500 versus people that have big distributed development teams. Those things are very different. And yeah, there's some intersection, and yeah, some of them are Fortune 500 companies, but it wasn't the criteria. It wasn't what made you a good customer for me. So you have to get super specific. And then once you've got this hypothesis, you don't have to do 100 prospect interviews, but do 10. And get them on the phone and say, how bad's the pain? How would you quantify the pain? Meaning, how much money do you lose because you can't do this thing? How do you solve the problem now? And sometimes people will tell you, well, I hire a person to do this, or, I have to take an hour of my day every day to do this thing right now because it's manual. And you say, well, what's an hour of your day worth? And then is that every day? So that's like 5 days a week and X number of months, and even if I were to multiply that out, how many hours do you spend on that in a year? Can I quantify that? And then you want to understand how they're solving it now. So they might say, oh, I'm solving it by throwing bodies at it, or I'm solving it by just, using a spreadsheet or something. But you want to understand that because you're going to have to get them to switch to doing your thing instead. So you need to understand that. You want to ask them, okay, you got the pain or whatever. This is what my thing does. Would you pay for that? How much would you pay for it? $10,000? $5? And then you want to have a conversation around, is there anything that would stop you from adopting a solution like this or buying a thing like this? Is there something that would stop you? We don't have the budget for things like that. I'd have to figure out where to get the budget, or all my folks are trained on this other thing and your thing looks complicated and my people don't like new things, or something like that. Sometimes there's a regulatory problem why they can't adopt your thing or something. But you need to figure this out. And while you're having these conversations, you're looking for this strong emotion. You're looking for people that are like, I hate this. I hate this problem is driving me nuts. It's not kind of yeah, it's kind of a pain. Yeah, now that you mention it, I never really was conscious of that being a pain before. But yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, it kind of bugs me. Yeah, I probably spent 10 minutes on that. Like that you're never going to sell that person anything. But if the person says, oh my God, it kills me, like, oh, and they'll rant at you. Those people feel the pain. Or you're looking for emotion when you describe what you've got. You see, I've got this thing, and people get really excited. Say, that's fantastic, I love that thing. And then you're trying to figure out, why you? Why are you so excited when the last 3 people I pitched weren't? What is it about you that gets you super excited about this? Or what is it about you that makes that pain so much worse than the previous people? That's what you're trying to get at. So the first thing is customer. So this is another example. So again, I mentioned this one earlier, but I joined this super early stage startup that had 3 customers. And I went out and I talked to all 3 customers, and literally all 3 customers had done the deal because they knew my CEO, and it turned out that only one of the 3 was actually using the product. And the one was using it in such a weird, unorthodox way. I was pretty sure that no other customer on the planet was ever going to use our thing like that. So I had 3 customers and they were all paying, but it was crap, basically. And so we had this thing, and it was a database. And what it was a database that could do a super fast query, a certain kind of query, like a needle in a haystack query, over a vast amount of data. That was our whole thing. And we had a patent on it. It was cool. No one else had such a thing. And it was originally designed for a bank, but the guys that built it retained the rights to the IP. And so the only customer that was actually using it was the bank that this thing had originally been designed for. And again, their use case was so bizarre and weird. No one else except Bank of Montreal is ever going to do that thing. And so there weren't any more customers like that. So basically what we had was a solution looking for a problem. And so, it's too late. I've already joined by the time I figured this out. And then I'm like, well, that sucks. So then I started thinking, well, okay, what's our target market? So I'm having a conversation with the executive team. Okay, what do you think our target market is for this? Well, we do this needle in a haystack query thing for people with vast amounts of data. So anybody that has vast amounts of data would need this thing, right? Okay, let's test that out. Let's find some people with vast amounts of data. So, we all pull up our LinkedIn. We all find some people that work at places where they have vast amounts of data, and we start having these interviews. Hello, manager of data stuff at some other bank, right? That, we get introduced, we go in, we have a thing. Hi, we're a startup, help us out. You guys have a whole bunch of data. Do you ever do queries like this? Yep, all the time. How do you do them now? We just run them overnight. It takes 12 hours to run a query like that, so we just run it overnight. Start it at 9 p.m., get there and go away, come back, 9 a.m., it's all there. Oh, cool. Well, we have this thing that could actually do that same query in a minute. The guy says, wow, that's great. In a minute, that's amazing. How do you do that? Well, we're talking about fuzzy logic, blah, blah, blah. And so the guy's like, wow, that's amazing. I love that. You do it in a minute. He says, so would you buy it? And he goes, probably not. No. Well, why not? And he says, well, overnight's fine. Overnight's fine. I don't need it right away. Well, we only run this report once a day. So I just set it up at night, comes the next morning. I don't need it right away. Okay. So I got a way to do super fast query, a large amount of data, a certain kind of query. Not everybody needs it fast. And my value proposition is fast. So who needs it fast? That's the question. So now you got to be large amount of data, but you got to need this thing fast. Oh, who needs it fast? Well, we have maybe 30 meetings where people have this problem. It's not really a problem. They're running this kind of query. It takes 8 hours. Who cares? I don't need it done any faster. Would you do something different if you could get it in a minute? Nope. Would you pay any money? Nope. Sucks, right? And so we keep having these meetings, and I'm like, literally nobody needs this thing. And then we get the dumb luck thing. We got an inbound call from a guy who knows our VC, whatever. I heard you guys have this thing. I'm really excited about it. We show it to him, and he goes nuts. He's crazy. He's literally like jumping up and down in his seat. He's like, this is so great. Oh my God, this solves this giant problem for me. All this stuff. You know what he's got? He's got a digital ad business, and it has this giant terabytes of data. And what he needs to be able to do is answer a customer support call with it. And what happens right now is The call comes in, the rep says, that's fantastic, we'll call you in 12 hours with the answer. And the person on the phone is like, I want it right away. With our thing, they could run the answer right away. Cool. So then it was like, okay, anybody who needs it for support, that's the thing. And so all of a sudden it was like, okay, digital marketing, digital ad stuff, digital ad, whatever, like basically, and then the other thing it turned out was you only have that when it's machine generated data. So the more we got into this thing, the more our thing got super specific. So, but we had to go through that process. Otherwise we didn't know. Otherwise we're like, hey, we've got this thing and it does this super fast query, a large amount of data. Anybody with a large amount of data would need it, right? No, because the thing they're doing right now is good enough. That's my example. So that's input number one, customer. Input number two, offering. So this is actually, when I say offering, what I really mean is customer context. So your offering only makes sense to a customer within a context. And so, and this is the way your customer will figure this out, what you do. And so what that actually is positioning. But if I say positioning, everybody gets all confused. So I won't call it that. But what I'm trying to get at here is, according to prospects, what market are you in? This is actually a super important question to answer, because the answer to that question triggers all these assumptions in the mind of your customer. So in the example I used before, this database we had that does a super fast query, blah, 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 blah. You know what one of my worst problems was? Is that we were going in and talking about it as a database. And half the people we talked to didn't want a database. What we actually were was an analytics tool. The problem with calling it a database is as soon as I said database, they're like, oh, I don't want another database. We're Oracle shop. All my guys are trained on Oracle. We don't database. No, we don't want that. Whereas if I go in and say we're an analytics tool, oh, okay, that's all right. I don't have one of those. Keep talking. Different, right? So the minute you say I'm in this market, it triggers all these assumptions. Now, what you've got, if you don't tell people what market you're in, they will guess and put you in a market. And so you'll say, we have a platform that does blah, 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 and they'll say, what, like Salesforce? And so the first thing they'll try to do is figure out what market you're in if you don't tell them. And the minute they get that, and you'll get these things where they'll say, what? So that's like a CRM, right? And if you say, yes, good, you compete with Salesforce. I gotcha. I know how much you cost. I know how you sell. I know everything about you. And then if you don't like that comparison, you got to back it up. No, we're not really like Salesforce. No, it's too late. I already put you in that box. You're in the Salesforce box. You're never coming out. So if I go in and say you're a database, then they say, no, we're a special database, needle and haystack query, we got patents, all this stuff. No, it's too late. You said database, now you're a database. It's going to take a miracle for me to stop thinking about you as Oracle competitor. But if I go in and say analytics tool, okay, who's my competitor now? It's Business Objects, it's Cognos, we don't have any of those things. I get what you do analytic type queries, you don't do LTP stuff, that's completely different than what a database does. And so the first thing you have to understand about your offering is what box the customers are gonna put you in, and if you don't like that box, then you better construct a box and forcefully put yourself in there, because otherwise you'll be stuck in the box they put you in. So, and that box is gonna change what they think your expected features should be, what your pricing should be, who your competitors are, how they're gonna buy from you. Their expectation for support and service changes. If I say I compete with Google, what's my expectation for support? None. Because Google doesn't support you. You can't call Google support. If I say I compete with Salesforce, well then of course you have support. And of course it's 24/7. And of course you do list of things. And I know what you cost. You cost like Salesforce costs, because I know what they cost. All that stuff. And so and this is why I have a whole separate session on positioning, because I think positioning is so fundamentally important, and it's actually really hard to do, and most startups don't do it deliberately. Because they'll just go in and say, I sell a clicker for presentations, but a special one, no, not that clicker, and then they'll try to back it up. It's terrible. When what they could have done is in the beginning said, oh, we do something else, and put themselves in a completely different market. So this is how you figure this out. So again, when you're talking to existing customers or prospects, you want to have these conversations, right? Where you say, how would you describe, like, I pitch you my thing. Okay, now you pitch it back to me. What is that? What's the word you use to describe that? Okay, if my thing didn't exist, what would you compare me to? And then, you know, even words they use to describe your features will sometimes give you a clue about where they're subconsciously placing you in terms of what market they think you're in. And I've had this problem with literally every startup I've ever been at. We have repositioned at some point from being in one market to being in another. And this is a biggie. So part of why this matters is because of competitive alternatives. So if you go in and talk to a customer, one of the most important things to understand is how they are solving the problem today. So you solve a problem, that problem exists in the market. There may or may not be other software solutions to the problem, but that doesn't mean the problem isn't being solved today. It's just being solved in different ways. And so it's super important to understand that. So if no solution exists, what do they do? And so sometimes you've got competitors that look just like you, only their thing's not mobile and my thing is, or their thing has crappy performance and my thing doesn't, or their thing has a terrible UI and mine doesn't, or mine does these three things and that doesn't do that. But a lot of times if you're doing something really innovative, your competitors look like this, right? It's like, I do that today, I just do it on paper. Or I do that today by picking up the phone and making 5 calls. Or I do that today by just throwing a bunch of interns at it. And then this is the worst one, is they'll say, oh yeah, you're right, it'd be great if I had your solution. And you say, well, how do you solve that now? I just don't solve it. Don't solve it at all. I do nothing. Which is terrifying, right? It means it's not really all that much of a problem. It's not a problem enough that they've actually tried to solve it. Occasionally you'll get into these markets where people don't actually, are not conscious of the fact that they have a problem. These are difficult markets to sell into because the first thing you have to do is make them aware of their problem. We'll get into that when we talk about buying process. But this is super important to sell, to understand, because when you go to sell, you got to be better than this. So you might know about 4 little startups that do the thing that you do, but to your customers, they probably don't. A lot of times they don't. And so if you go into your customers, your real competitor isn't actually some other dinky-doo startup that nobody's heard of either. Your real competitor is paper, interns, phone calls, Word. And how do I get you to get off that and get onto my thing? And so it's important to really understand. And so a lot of times what you'll get is startups will, build their website and their materials and their sales pitch, and they'll be focused on all these little features that make them slightly better than these other guys in the market. But meanwhile, you both suck at replacing interns. And so you both lose. And you're an expert at your own market, but customers often aren't. Yeah.
So what do you do in that case? Let's say if you do have a solution that fits in one of those 4 categories.
Right. Let's say it's interns. Like, interns are a pain in the ass. I don't know if you've ever had an intern. Like, an intern's a pain, right? It stinks hiring an intern, managing an intern, all that sort of stuff, right? All that stuff. So if what you're suggesting could get rid of interns altogether, then what you have to do is paint the picture for the person. Imagine your life without interns. Oh, I kind of like my life without interns, right? But if what you're doing is, I'm going to replace half an intern, you're still going to have interns, but they're going to do this other thing. That's kind of less exciting. And then you say, but it'll be way easier to train your interns. Maybe you get your interns doing something else. Okay, maybe now you got me. But the comparison is interns. That's the important thing. It's not some other little product that no one's heard about. And so you have to be able to do things like quantify how many hours does this save? How, in this process, where is it actually saving you money? And so your value proposition has to be against the actual competitive alternative, not, when you're pitching for money, it's different. If I'm pitching a VC, then yeah, you might have to explain why you're better than all the dinky-do other little things. But I'm talking about actual customer stuff here. The do nothing is the worst one. And all it means is that you're going to have to spend some time evangelizing the problem, which isn't impossible, but it's hard. We'll get to that. And then the last piece is, okay, I understand what market I'm in. I understand what the alternatives are. Then I really have to understand, okay, compared to those alternatives, what are my unique, amazing, only I can do it attributes? And then you have to deeply understand that. But again, it has to be up against those things. And then what's the value for customers that enables, right? I can get rid of my interns. I can, save 5 hours a day versus doing this thing on paper. I can, whatever it is your value is. All right, so that's the second thing. So we're still on inputs, right? So first input is customers. Second input is your solution and the market that it functions in. Third one is buying process. Now, most startups don't worry about this too much because they're ignorant of it. And if you do B2C or B to very small b, sometimes the buying process is very short. But there is a buying process, whether you're conscious of it or not. So a buying process is not the same thing as a sales process. So a buying process is the steps that a customer goes through in the process of making a purchase and then subsequently a renewal, which is not the same thing as what you did to sell to a person. So that's the first thing to understand. It has to be from the customer's point of view. And so I have this little thing. I don't know if you can read this because it's pretty small, but I'll walk you through it. So most buying processes look theoretically something like this. And depending on how mature your market is, people will have different starting points on this process. But and it's not always linear or whatever, but I'm just using this as illustrative example. So most buying processes start like this. First, you are in a blissful state where you don't have any problems and you do not have a need for the thing that you do. So the example I always give in this one is my mother and smartphones. So so I was like early smartphone adopter living in Waterloo, and I had one of those Blackberries, like when there were no smartphones, there was that blue Blackberry. So I come home with this thing, and my mother's like, "What is that thing?" And I said, "It's amazing. I can get my email on it when I'm at the airport." And she's like, "That's stupid. One, I don't have email. Two, I don't go to the airport. I have no need for this." So she's here. And then what happened? And so she doesn't think she has a problem. She doesn't, there's nothing going on here. Then something happens and you realize you have a need. So this happened when, eventually I got a better smartphone. And so I'm home with my better smartphone, and I'm like, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You could surf the web on this thing and like look stuff up and Google things and whatever." And she's like, "Yeah, that'd be kind of interesting. Like, I wouldn't buy one, but I get why you would want one of those." So she's kind of in here, like, yeah, I get there's a need for that, not for me, but for other people. And yeah, I can sort of, not enough to make me won't go out and buy one, but I kind of get it. And then something happens that triggers you to say, I got to solve this problem. I got to go figure this out. And so for my mother, it was like I come home and I'm like, "Check this out, Mom. Facebook on my phone." She's like, I need that. I need one of those things, and I need it now. So then she moves into eval, which is like, she's like, "Okay, I got to get one of these smartphone things. I've never had one before. What kind of a smartphone should I get?" So she gets in this, sat in this phase for like 8 months. Should I get an iPhone? What's the difference between an iPhone and an Android phone? I don't really get it. You had that thing with the keyboard. That looks good. Maybe I should have that thing with the keyboard. And so then she's talking to all her friends. Oh, so-and-so has an iPhone, but so-and-so has this other thing, and those sound expensive, and blah, blah, blah. So it's trying to figure out what kind of solution you need. So you're evaluating things. And then eventually you get to the stage where you're like, okay, I'm done that phase now. Now I'm actually going to go buy one. So in the case of my mother, she goes to the Bell store. She attempts to buy one. The guy's a total jerk to her, confuses her, whatever. And she goes back to this because she didn't have a good experience in there. So sometimes you can go backwards on this thing. So then you go to buy. Then you buy. Hopefully you use it and enjoy it. And if you're in a SaaS business, you enjoy it enough that you renew every month or every year, whenever the renewal thing is. So that's roughly what it looks like. Now, here's what's important. You, as the entrepreneur, need to understand that at any step in this process, there are accelerators and there's friction points. Accelerators are things that can happen that will push you along this way. Friction points are things that will push you the other way or get you stuck. And so for each one of these phases, the accelerators are things like, at the no need phase, the accelerator is if I suddenly understand that this is a problem, meaning there's a cost to not solving this thing, that will accelerate me along. If my solution is good enough and I say, well, yeah, maybe there's a little cost, but Word is free, and so I'm fine with that. And that's a friction point. If you can't convince me that your thing is so much better that my thing right now isn't good enough, then I'll just sit here forever in the no need phase. At the need stage, I need to understand the value of solving the problem. Here, I get into this by knowing there's a cost to not solving the problem. In here, I need to know the value of actually getting it done. And then the friction points on there is, it's like my mother. She's like, yeah, I get you might want that thing, but it sounds complicated and it's going to be expensive and I don't know how to use it and what happens when it breaks, who am I going to call, all this stuff. And she sat here forever. Right? Because, it looks risky. There's value, but it's not that compelling, not enough to make me go evaluate. Then you get into evaluation. The accelerators to get you to buy are, is this thing for me? Does this meet my requirements? Do I understand the requirements? Do I even understand how to compare an iPhone and a whatever? So how do I actually figure this out? And so here you're trying to figure out how to buy, how to evaluate. And so if I can't figure out how to evaluate, I'll get stuck in here and I'll get this analysis paralysis. I'd love to buy a phone, but I can't figure out which one to buy, so therefore I don't buy any. Or you'll get into this thing where you're like, geez, I looked at it and smartphones are great, but it's just not for me. There's no granny phone exists and I'm looking for granny phone and I can't find it. So I'll just sit here forever until granny phone shows up. Same with the buy. If I go to buy, this is where sales and things like this work, right? You can accelerate people through this if you've got a sale, there's a short-term offer, there's a reason to buy right now. We'll speed you through this. Friction points are the opposite of that. Well, maybe there'll be a sale around Christmas. Oh, new phones come out in October. My phone sucks right now. If we're talking about phone, I have the worst phone ever. And I've been suffering through this phone for months because I know new phones come out in October. And you're the stupid person on the planet if you buy a new phone end of August, beginning of September. That's just dumb. A brand new phone is going to come out in 4 weeks. So I'm not going to buy right now. Then there's the other thing, if it's a lot of money, people will sit on it for a while and they'll worry, what if I change my mind? I know these are my requirements now, but geez, I'm thinking about having kids and maybe that changes everything. And oh geez, right now I've got this job, but what if I get fired from my job or something happens? Does that change this purchase? That's what gets people stuck over here. The enjoy thing is pretty straightforward, right? I use it, I enjoy it, I have a good experience with customer service. All these things will get you to renew. The opposite will drive you backwards, right? I get bad service, I don't like the user experience, I thought it did this thing, it doesn't, you promised me this, you didn't deliver. That will send you out of this so that you don't renew. And And then even if you make it all the way down here, you still might get caught by a friction point in that, some new solution comes out that looks better than yours. Or I got all the way down and I said, you know what, I used it, it was okay, but I don't actually need this thing in my life. Like, I'm trying to scale things back. I'm trying to save some money. I'm not going to renew this thing. And what you want is for people to get down here and say, oh, like, it would be bad. If this thing went away, it would be bad, and we're going to have to renew. Now, here's where this is important. Depending on the maturity of your market, the bulk of the people, like, so where I was talking earlier, who's your best customers? Your best customers will be as far along here as possible, because the closer they are to this, the easier it is to sell them. So generally, if you're a startup, you do not want to waste your time on these people. Like, my mother was not an early smartphone adopter. It would have been pointless for RIM to market to her. She's literally never going to buy one. And by the time she does, it's stupid. But RIM should be marketing to me. I'm sitting in airports all the time. I'm doing email. I'm on the road. Like, I'm exactly who RIM. And so I'm all the way down here. I get that I need this. Yeah.
Does that change for those situations, like the interns doing nothing, using Excel or something like that, where someone doesn't actually know that they have a need in your job?
Yeah. So if there's no software solutions in the market, sometimes it's an indication that the market's not mature, meaning people haven't collectively decided enough, right? This is stupid. I can't do this on paper anymore. It's killing me. And they're situated and they're waiting for something to happen in the market that they finally get to this breaking point. And so what you'll see in emerging markets is some of the folks will be here and some will be here. But you as the startup need to target these folks. So what it means is, like, I'll give you an example. I did some work with a company that sells a software solution for construction managers. And so before this solution came up, everybody was doing everything manually on paper, a little bit of Excel, whatever. And that was fine for the longest time. Now all of a sudden, everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket. It's not unusual to have tablets on a job site. And so if you're a really good construction manager, you're starting to think like, hey, what else can I put on this tablet? It would be cool if I could do deficiency management on this tablet. Sometimes they're doing a little bit of that, taking pictures of deficiencies and doing email from their tablet. Those folks are kind of here. They're not necessarily here. Some of them aren't there at all. Some of them, no tablets on job sites. They're all old guys in there. They're nowhere near that. But some of them look like this. Now, as they've matured, now there's a couple of solutions in the market. And what you're seeing now is a lot of folks saying, I know there's such a thing as deficiency management on a cell phone. I want to buy one of those things and I'm looking for it. If I'm a startup in there, where they started was there were some folks here, and all the deals they closed were folks that were here, and they were actively trying to target companies that are here. And now you're starting to see even the ones that are here are shifting over, and the ones that previously were here are actually now in an active evaluation process where they're like, yeah, I know there's solutions like this exist, and the market is now kind of emerging.
Have you ever had an instance where you had to target people in that first call?
It's horrible. Like, it's just horrible. It's really horrible. And the only time where it wasn't horrible is when I was working at a giant company. Like, so we invented some crap when I was at IBM. Like, we literally invented a market at IBM that didn't exist, and then we convinced people that there was a problem that they had to solve, and then we convinced them that they had to solve it with our stuff. It was actually awesome, but we had limitless buckets of money and time to do it. And so, we spent 8 months in a room with industry analysts. You could only do it if you were IBM. Now, there's other examples of startups doing this, and it generally means you're creating the market from scratch, and you can do it. It's just time, money, effort. It's if it's your second startup and you've already had one exit and you have an easier time raising money, you can do these things. So, for example, an example of this one locally is Mark Organ that runs Influitive. So he had previously been the founder of Eloqua. And so Eloqua is the thing, everybody knows it, a giant exit, whatever. He's a super established entrepreneur. He goes to start his next business, which, by the way, was also a market development play, which it's crazy for a first timer. But on a second timer, he's done it once already. Mark gets a good idea. Oh, I'm going to build this platform for advocacy marketing. Nobody even knows what that is. But because he's done it before, he has a pretty easy time raising money. So he raises a, hefty looking seed round. And he's spent several years now convincing people, this is what advocacy marketing is. This is why you should be doing it. This is why you should have tools to do it. And this is why the tool you should do it is mine, right? And so he's now got a significant number of big companies anyways over here in the need and eval stage, and now he's got little competitors popping up and stuff, and so it's different, but he's been at it for years. And so the payoff is potentially giant in the same way that he invented marketing automation, and eventually that turned into a giant market filled with giant players, and everybody made heaping bags of money. The risk in it is that you do all the work of creating the market, and then these sneaky little competitors slip in behind you and take it from you, sort of MySpace, Facebook style. Right? So you convince people that a social network is something that they need, and then somebody comes along and just does it better. I worked for 18 months on a contract with a big Chinese tech company called Huawei, but the CEO there, I watched him give a talk, and I thought it was just such a great analogy. And one of the things he talked about was they don't like to be the first people in new markets, mainly because you don't know what works and what doesn't work. And so, his thing was, we have the best engineers in the world, we have the best technology in the world, but we don't understand a market until someone else goes in there first. And he described it as, we wait until we have a lighthouse competitor. And the lighthouse competitor lights up all the rocks so we know where to steer the boat. And I thought, oh, that's actually kind of smart. Now, what you miss is we fundamentally in North America, I think, don't believe that's the right way to win markets, right? We're trying to be first. We're big on land grab plays. But if you look at the history of businesses, sometimes that works, sometimes you smash up on the rocks and, somebody sails in behind you and misses all the rocks because you showed them what not to do. So this, again, the whole point of this being, how do I build a marketing plan? So I need to kind of understand this. I need to understand the triggers that get me to go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And I need to understand the things that can mess me up or get you stuck down here. So the reason that matters is if the majority of your folks are at a particular point in this buying process, the marketing tactics that you run are different. And so if all your folks are way down here in this, I don't even think I have a problem, then what you're marketing is the problem. And that's difficult for people to get their head around. Like, we're used to marketing solutions because we build solutions and then we try to market, here's my solution and we built it and here's all my features and this is why it's great. If people don't understand that they have the problem, what you're actually marketing is the problem. And so there's lots of examples about this. So one of the most famous examples is Mint.com. It's an older example now, but the Mint guys ran a really great blog for 6 months before they launched a product. And what the blog was about was it was about younger people managing their finances. And it was at a time when, and basically what it was they were trying to gather up a group of followers that were interested in doing a better job of saving up cash to buy a car, or saving up cash to buy a house, or doing a better job on investments. And so all this blog was about was, how do I be smarter about saving? How do I be smarter about managing my money? How do I be smarter about creating a budget and sticking to a budget? And that has nothing to do with their software, right? It has to do with the problem. So what they're trying to do is attract these people that get they have a problem, and at the same time they're evangelizing the problem. Like, can't buy a car? Here's why. Because you don't have a budget, dude. You're not broke. You're not nearly as broke as you think you are. If you save $5 every day for the rest of the year, and then you're like, yeah, you're right. You know, I should maybe manage my budget better. And so what I'm doing is I'm convincing you that you got this problem. And so they did this fantastic thing where I forget what the numbers were, but they were spectacular. Like, they had hundreds of thousands of people subscribed to this blog. So then the minute they launched Mint, they had this ready-built set of people that they had already convinced that had the problem. They'd done this great job of evangelizing that the problem existed and you should solve it. And then, oh, geez, look at this. Here, I have a solution to this problem.
Got 100,000 users, I think, in 6 months.
It was crazy, right? Like, just an amazing job. Yeah, there's lots of examples. Like HubSpot, the same thing, right? They did an amazing job of evangelizing why content marketing or inbound marketing, matters, right? And what that is, and why you should be doing it, and blah, blah, blah. They continue to do a good job at it, even though, you know, it's been so long. They've been so consistent at it. So when you think about what are the things you actually do, the things you do in there are different than what you would do further on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for Mint.com, do you think that, so the people that were reading the blog in the first place were people that didn't know they had that problem? Or they were kind of already interested in budgeting and kind of...
Some did, some didn't, right? And so in building this community of people, they were...
They were just talking about things that would like reach out to the millennial audience. So they would talk about like school tuition, like how you could afford a car, housing, like multiple things, I think it was, right?
Yeah, and so what you had was a mix, right? You had a mix of folks that were already trying to do budgeting stuff, and so they're trying to get better at it. And those folks are in the, I know I got the problem, I'm trying to do better at solving it. But they're also attracting in these people that are like, geez, I never thought about doing a budget. Geez, I do want a car. How am I going to buy a car? And then they're in there looking for information, and then they're getting them into this mindset of, oh yeah, I do have a problem. Yeah, I should figure this out. Yeah, I should do a better job.
The guy who did it actually posted exactly what he did step by step.
Yeah, you can Google it, and he talks about his plan and all that stuff, and it's not hard, right? It's not hard. The important thing is this, right? It's understanding that it wasn't about the features and functionality and, oh, we can connect to your bank and, oh, we can all the like feature function crap of Mint.com. They weren't marketing the solution. What they were marketing was the mindset you had to be in order to know you wanted to buy the solution. That's what they were marketing. They're really marketing the problem. And so when you start thinking about marketing tactics that work when folks are at these stages, it's, you know, things that are focused on the problem. So I'm writing articles and blog posts, I'm doing infographics that show you with data that this is a problem and you need to think about this. I've got data and trend reports. Like, this is why this wasn't a problem before, but now it is, and so you should pay attention to it. There's going to be videos, but the videos are focused on the problem, right? I might be doing curated content. Hey, this is becoming a thing. Look, these guys are talking about it. These guys are talking about it. These guys are talking about it. Oh my God, if you're not worried about, you know, what you're going to do about this, you're crazy, because this is becoming a thing. You could ignore it last year, but not now. Not now, because all these things are happening. You're trying to get folks to sign up for your newsletter so that you can educate them about this stuff and hit them regularly. And you might be doing SEO, website optimization, landing pages, all that stuff, but it's optimized on the problem. So it's not saying buy my better, you know, screwdriver. It's talking about why, you know, in general screws are good. You should think about turning them. And so, and then here's what's important. Where I do those tactics, no one knows they have the problem. So no one's searching for a solution. So no one's going to your website because no one cares about you. And so you have to go where the people are. And so if you look at folks that do this very well, they're looking for communities of people, and they're getting their content, they're getting this stuff into those communities, and then they're trying to attract them to the blog or attract them to sign up for the newsletter or whatever. But they can't count on people saying, best screwdriver for whatever. No one knows they need one. So instead, they've got to go find places where those folks already hang out, or people that may have a propensity to care about this stuff already hang out. And then they've got to get their stuff in front of them where they are. So that's forums, it's social networks, it's news groups, it's industry events, it's associations, it's getting your blog posts on other people's blogs because no one gives a crap about your blog yet. And so it's that. And then the purpose of that stuff, this is important too, because nobody thinks if they don't know they have the problem, it's hard to get their attention. And it's super hard to get their attention by saying, problem. I don't have that problem. And so you see a lot of the content that works really good here needs to be super, super engaging. But the focus is usually more education, or it's edutainment, right? That I'm going to make you laugh, but I'm going to teach you a little thing while you're in there laughing at my cat video. I'm going to teach you a little bitty thing that gets you a little bit further to realizing that you got a problem. And so it's entertainment, it's education, it's engaging. And then the desired action, my call to action for these campaigns that I'm running is it's not a purchase because you're not ready yet. And so my call to action on my campaigns are, I want you to follow my shit. I want you to sign up for my blog. I want you to sign up for my newsletter. I want to just follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook, follow me, or whatever. But I'm not selling you anything. I can't sell you anything. You don't even know you have the problem yet. So first I got to get you here. Now that's where everybody's down there, no need, right? The next, don't be like that. Yeah, the next one is you get into evaluation and stuff. And so if your market's a little more mature, you're further down the path, maybe you've got some folks in your market that look like this where they're evaluating, those things are different. Now that they're evaluating, they're actually looking at solutions. And so because they're looking at solutions, this is where I get to talk about my features. So now I'm getting into solution-focused content. So these are things where I'm saying, oh, buy mine because mine is better than these other things. Get mine because other people do this, but my thing is different, and this is what's different about it, and this is why you should care. So I'm doing articles and blog posts, but again, I'm not focused on the problem now, I'm focused on the solution. Because you're there. I'm doing demo videos, I'm doing webinars, I'm doing in-person events, I'm writing stuff like case studies and feature guides and white papers and things that go deep on my product because that's where the people are and that's what they're trying to figure out. Is this thing for me? I'm doing ROI calculators and pricing calculators and things that literally teach you how to evaluate a solution. And that's what I'm focused on at this stage. Maybe I'm doing advertising is going to work here. Sponsorships, SEO, landing pages, all these things that are focused on the solution. Where I'm doing it, I'm still going where the prospects are, but increasingly I'm doing stuff on my own turf because they're going to get there through SEO. They're going to get there through, hey, I'm looking for solutions that do whatever. They're Googling that stuff and they're hitting your page. So they're now coming on your turf, so there better be some good stuff for them to consume when they get there. But I'm still going out to all this stuff, news groups, industry events, wherever I go. But I've also got my own branded sites, and that stuff's important. The purpose of this is also education, but it's more about the solution. And it's this, right? It's differentiation. What I'm trying to do is I'm going to move you towards doing an active evaluation. I'm trying to get you to sign up for the trial. And so that's my desired action. My desired action here is what it is permission to sell. Yeah.
So for B2B companies, would only industry events and conversation networks and LinkedIn apply? Who's doing this for B2B?
Well, so if I'm doing it for B2B, again, it depends on my customers. So I got to look at the other inputs because buying process is only one. So it kind of depends on my solution. It kind of depends on the people I'm trying to reach. And so for me, my experience on LinkedIn has been super hit and miss. So, I sold a solution that was in the retail space, and LinkedIn was fantastic. All my people were on LinkedIn. If I sent the people in mail, they all responded. It was fantastic. Whereas I sold another thing to big investment banks, and LinkedIn was crap. The investment bankers don't even have their pictures on LinkedIn. They're terrible LinkedIners. They literally do nothing on LinkedIn. It's pointless. And so it kind of depends on your folks, right, and where they hang out. The other thing is industry events for retail. There's 2 big industry events, and they're so giant, it's really hard to do anything at them. Whereas in financial services, there's some really targeted small ones that you could actually go and get some stuff done. So it kind of depends so much on your customer and your solution and what you're trying to do, and it's not just this, right? That's kind of the point of this, is you got to have all the inputs before you can then stand back and say, okay, given this is my customer, this is my solution, this is where they're all sitting, here's some things I should try. So in this one, what I'm trying to do is get folks contact information so I can sell them stuff, or I'm just trying to get them to buy. Free trial signups, just go to the purchase. So if you hear, that's my call to action, the desired action I'm trying to do here. And then again, you can't forget this bit, because we're all in SaaS, or at least lots of us are. And this bit, we sometimes we forget about this, but in SaaS, you don't actually make your money when you close a sale. For most of the time, the way your business model works, you don't actually make your money until, if you're calculating lifetime value of a customer, like most folks are calculating that out, 3 years, 4 years, right? So I actually, in order to close my sale, I got to get them to renew 3 times after I've closed them. And so what am I doing to make sure that happens? So again, this is all activation and engagement oriented stuff. So now that I've got you signed up and you paid once, you're in, how do I know you're actually going to use this thing, enjoy it? How do I make sure you feel the value? And so that's when you get into like customer support stuff, demos, interactive stuff that shows you all the really cool features. You might start doing things with user groups or user forums so that you can get users teaching each other and talking to each other. Best practice guides, how-to guides. Again, all these ROI things so that people understand the ROI of what they're doing. Sometimes they don't. And then there's all this sort of retention stuff you'll do, like customer newsletters and things where you're trying to get people engaged and active and make sure that if they have a problem, they know how to get to you. Where this happens, obviously, is mainly on your turf now, because you've got them, you've got their email, they're on your thing. If it's a SaaS product, you can push crap at them even through the app. So, this is happening on your own sites, it's going through your own product, but it also happens out in other places too. And so the whole point here is you're trying to get customers to experience the value, you're trying to create raving fans. And the desired action here is renewal, and if you're doing a really good job of this, you get referral business out of it too. So the desired action is I want you to be a reference, I want you to refer business, but ultimately the big thing I want is I want you to sign up again. So there we are. This is just kind of a summary of, again, if you're at the different stages, this is what you're doing. These are the kinds of things you might do. This is where you're going to actually execute them on. This is the purpose of it. This is the desired action you're trying to do. It's hard, right? No wonder everyone sucks at marketing. So so all those are all your inputs. So I got customers, I got what market am I in, who am I compared to. Then I kind of understand how my folks buy and what moves them along and what stops them. Then I want to make sure that I've got, operations stuff happening. And so if I'm running tactics, what I want to be able to do is measure for each of these things what my expected results are. So if my assumption is I sell to folks that look like this, so if I go back to my example of the business analyst solution, so my assumption is you run a big distributed dev team, you're going to want my thing, so I go to this trade show is full of people like that, I should get a whole bunch of leads. If I go there and I don't, something is terribly, terribly wrong with one of my assumptions. And this is horrible. I don't just throw it out and say, whoa, trade shows suck. It means I've actually made a horrible assumption about who my customers are and why. Which is why you need this. So you need to come in and say, well, I'm going to assume that these tactics work like this. I'm going to assume that leads flow through like this. And so if it fails, then it tells me something drastic about my assumptions, and it should be ringing all the alarm bells. Where again, in my cycle of marketing, stuff fails, no problem. You just chuck it out, try some other stuff. But in this one, you've done all that work to understand who your customers are, what they think you're all about, where they're in the buying process. If you pick something based on all of that and it doesn't work, you are in desperate, deep trouble. And you need to figure that out. Like, you need to go all the way back to the drawing board and say, well, what, like, it should be all hands on deck, red alert. So I'll tell you a story about this. So I work for this company where we acquired by this big company in the Valley, and what we were was this little CRM for investment bankers, and then we got bought by the global leader in CRM, which was at the time, is ages ago, which is Siebel, and Salesforce was still only selling into tiny little accounts, and they were pretty small at that point, and Siebel was the giant $2 billion revenue enterprise CRM on the market. And so my job, I had worked at IBM previously, so then for some reason they really loved IBMers, and they were like, ooh. So they give me this big promotion, and they put me in charge of marketing for all financial services and insurance solutions. It was $800 million revenue. So I got this big team, I got all this stuff. I get the spreadsheet of here's all the marketing tactics we're running, and here's what's supposed to happen, and here's what's happening, and it's just crap. Like, it's awful. Literally everything we're running sucks. So I'm going through this spreadsheet, and it's like every tactic we're doing is missing its number. So, everything we're doing, and we're doing email. The thing was giant too, like this huge budget, and we were doing email, we were doing webinars, we were doing ad buy, we were doing targeted list buys, we were doing an outsource thing with an outsourced calling agency, we were doing stuff with business partners. It was this giant list of things, and for everything, it was like if you looked at quarter on quarter, the number of leads it was generating was like. Look like this. And so I get this job, and I'm 3 weeks into it, and I'm like, oh man, all this looks really bad. And I have to go to this meeting with the head of marketing, and each division has one of me, but I'm the biggest division. And so we go in, and there's 6 divisions, and we all got to sort of report, here's a thing, and here's what's happening. And so it's my first one, and I'm there, and it goes around, they do everybody else first, because I'm a new guy. So they go around to each one, and everyone has a graph, looks just like mine. And I'm like, oh, that's a relief. And so everybody gets up, and the boss says, well, that looks terrible. Why is that so terrible? And every single person said the same thing. It's the economy, man. The economy's crap. This is 2001, and the economy's shit, and enterprises aren't buying. And once the economy gets better, this is going to come right back up. But no one's buying because no one's got budget, and this is just going to be bad for a year. Sorry. And every single one said the same thing. Then he got to me and he said, well, yours looks terrible too. Why does yours look terrible? I said, I have no idea. I've only been here for 3 weeks, but I literally have no idea. And I'll get back to you on that. So I go back, and I'm looking through all this thing, and I can't figure out, and basically everything's crap, to the point where I'm starting to think maybe it is the economy, because it's so persistent. It's across every tactic. It's across absolutely everything. So maybe it is the economy. I'm starting to talk myself into it. It is the economy. So I started going through, I had this inside sales team that worked for me, and most of these marketing tactics I was running were aimed at CIOs. So we sold to heads of IT. And so if we got a lead, like a CIO fills in a form or something, that would go to my inside sales team. My inside sales team would call and try to book an appointment for a sales rep to go in and sell them some stuff. And so I was doing reviews for my inside sales folks, and I think I had 6 guys, and I had 6 people, and none of them are making their number because everything's bad. And so we're generating less leads, and then when it goes to this stage, we're generating less appointments, so that makes sense. But when I look down this list, one guy on this list is actually killing it. So I'm like, wonder what's going on here. I'm going to go down to sales. So I go down to the thing, and so the next morning I go down, there's like six people on my team, And I get there at 9 in the morning, and they're all there except my one guy who's doing really good. He's not in yet. But everybody else is in. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit in on calls just to see what happens in these calls, because I want to hear from customers. So I get in the calls, and all the calls go exactly the same. They get on the phone, they call the CIO, and they say, hey, we're from Siebel. And the CIO goes, look, don't talk to me. I got no budget. Like, the economy's crap. I got no budget. My budget's cut in half this year. I'm basically spending my entire budget just keeping the lights on. We're not buying anything this year. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Everything's terrible. Oh, sorry, and that's the end of the call. And so every single one, I sit on maybe a dozen of these calls. Every rep's the same thing. 10:30, my guy shows up, comes rolling in. He looks, it's California, right? Like, he's probably high. But he rolls in, and he looks bad. And we all dress formal at Siebel, right? We're like enterprise software people. Everybody looks like, this guy looks like a bum. He rolls in. He's got his feet up in his desk, and he's making calls. And I'm like, hey, I'm April. I'm new, and I just want to listen to your call. He's like, sure, man, whatever. So we get on the call, and he does this thing where he calls. The first call he makes goes like this. He calls in. He gets the CIO, and he goes, hi, I'm calling from Siebel. Let me guess. Economy's crap, right? CIO goes, yeah, economy's crap. I probably got your budget sliced. Yeah, I did get my budget sliced. And they have this thing. And I was like, is this how this guy sells stuff? Like, does he actually convince this guy to take a meeting after this? And we get to the end, and he goes, what happened to all your budget anyway? And he goes, oh, it's just, it's just gone. We're not investing in any software anywhere. It's all going to sales. Yeah, that sucks. Who runs sales over there, by the way? Oh, it's John so-and-so. It's too bad, yeah. Gets off the phone, calls in again. I need to talk to John so-and-so. And he gets to the head of sales. And he says, hi, I'm from Siebel. And he's a new guy. Hi, I'm from Siebel. Economy's crap, right? Yeah, the economy's crap. Don't you wish you had better visibility in your pipeline so you knew what you were going to do this year? Don't you wish you could predict which deals were going to close and which weren't? Don't you wish you could see, and he gives them this whole speech on why you need CRM in a crappy economy. And the guy says, yeah, I do. Get in here. Books the meeting. Now think about this. I got a spreadsheet full of tactics. I got millions and millions and millions of dollars, and my entire budget is focused on CIOs. And what I just found out is that CIOs can't buy anything, and the buyer has shifted to heads of sales. I'm dead. Like, this is like a screaming emergency. I'm like, I have millions of names in a database, and not one of them are the VP of sales. I have to rip up my entire marketing plan if I want to go to that. I have no content. Like, all that stuff, I got no content, I got no landing pages, I got no value proposition, I got no features, I got nothing to sell to VP sales. Nothing. My rep is going to go in and do that meeting and pitch that VP sales like he's a CIO. Disaster. Disaster. Like, that's not just, hey, economy. That's disaster, disaster. All hands on deck. Marketing disaster. So I come out of that thing and I'm like, this is really bad. And then I got to go to have a meeting with the boss, right? And do the thing and go all around and and I show him my numbers and look like crap. And he says, why is it crap? And I'm like, I got some bad news. Here's what I think is happening. I got a guy in sales and he's making this work. He's selling to a different person. I think what's happening is we are seeing a fundamental shift in the buying power away from IT into the business lines of business. And my boss went, oh, that sounds bad. I said, yeah, it's really, really bad. What would we have to do to fix that? I'm like, we'd have to run completely different campaigns with completely different content in completely different ways to a completely different audience. And he said, let me think about that. And every month for 10 months, he said, let me think about that. Until I quit and went somewhere else, and then sit down. And while he was thinking about it, our stock price went from $100 to $30 to $15, and it got sold for $12 to Oracle. And I'm not saying that's why it happened. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. But and at the same time, Salesforce was coming up. Now, who's Salesforce selling to? VP sales. And what's their whole value proposition? No software. Don't talk to IT. Those guys are idiots. Right value proposition, right time. Interesting, right? But anyways, my point on this, right, is that, again, in that cycle of marketing, if you just tested a thing and it didn't work, boom, throw it out, whatever, right? But if you do this process and you say, I know all these things about my customers, I know all these things about my stuff, I know all these things about how they buy, if it doesn't work, then you have a fundamental emergency with your business. Like, it should make you wake up in the middle of the night and go, something is terribly, terribly wrong. So it should look like this, right? I should say, okay, given all the stuff I know, here's what I think should work. I should try these shows. I should try these kind of ads. I should try these things. And then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to have some conclusions. But then I got to go back to my inputs and say, does this verify what I think I know about customers? Does this verify what I think I know about my offering? Does this verify what I think I know about my buying process? And if something fails, you need to dig at that hard. Because what it means is you've got an assumption in here and it's killing you everywhere. It's killing you everywhere. That's the point. It's such a bad news presentation, really. That's the end. Yeah, so that's it. That's all I got. Questions?
How did you identify this model-based strategy?
Well, so here's the thing. So it started with this guy in the freaking golf thing. So the guy came in and said, and it just started to eat at me that I was like, do I actually just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, I do actually. I do throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. But then when I got scratching, I was like, no, that's not entirely true. Right? Because we were doing some new things. And then I said to myself, well, why did we pick that? Well, we picked that because we know these things about our customers. Well, we picked this one because, like, for example, I worked at IBM for a bunch of years, and they were really smart about that buy process thing. So we spent a lot of time talking about that at IBM, and they ran specific tactics that they would call closing tactics. And you don't see a lot of that in startups selling to enterprise companies, but you could. And so anytime I identified a thing that looked like, oh, this looks like that thing we used to do at IBM, like a golf tournament is actually a pretty good closing tactic. So if I looked at my buy process and saw there were a bunch of folks just about ready to close, but I couldn't get them closed, the best thing you can do with enterprise software folks in that situation is get them in a room with people that have already bought. Because then they'll say, well, geez, I'm worried about this. Oh, don't worry about that. We thought that too, but then we bought it and everything was fine. And after we did this, these great things happened, and that's what you want to do. IBM does tons of that stuff because they're constantly looking at the whole buy cycle, and they're publicly traded company. Like same with Siebel, they're on a real religious quarterly reporting thing. So it's end of the quarter, you got to make the number. And if there's stuff that's almost ready to close, they've got all kinds of tactics running to make sure it gets over the line. In startups, we don't have that discipline, and we're not thinking in terms of quarters. But lots of times you'll have things that are stuck down there. So that got me thinking about, as a VP marketing in a startup, am I actually being conscious about things I'm running different spots in the buy process? So I knew that was a thing I had to worry about. And then I also knew this customer thing was going to mess me up because I saw it at Siebel. And I have other companies where I worked for too, where we made assumptions, like the database one was another one. We made assumptions about who the customers were we were selling to, and then it turned out our assumptions were crap. And so all the marketing I was doing was bad. So that taught me that you got to get your customer thing figured out first before you can build the tactics. And then the positioning thing, like literally I've repositioned every product I've ever worked on. We've started out saying we were in one market, and at some point we realized like the comparables were wrong, the pricing was wrong, the assumptions customers making were wrong. We yanked it out and repositioned it somewhere else. So in my mind, it always came back to those three things. It was like, you got to figure out customers, you got to figure out market and comparables, and you got to figure out buy process stuff. If you know that, and your stuff's still not working, then it means you're wrong. Like something in there is terribly, terribly wrong. And you have this Siebel situation. Like there's something terribly wrong, that like something you believe to be true or you think you know, you actually don't.
Why do you think so many startups get positioning wrong?
Well, because I'll tell you why. We as product inventors usually have an idea in our head when we build something. And that thing, that idea usually is we're going to improve on something that already exists. So, you might say, I'm going to build a faster car, I'm going to build a better database, I'm going to build an easier to use CRM, I'm going to build a robot for manufacturing, right? And then you build the thing, and then you get it out there, and it does some things work and some things don't, and you go back and forth with customers. And at the same time, the market's evolving, and your competitors are evolving, and things are happening. And fast forward a year or so down the road, and this thing, like my database example, right? They set out to build a fuzzy logic database, but then when you actually got it in the market, calling it a database, it actually fundamentally wasn't what they built. What they built was an analytics tool. It made more sense as an analytics tool. So I'll give you an example. These guys in Waterloo, they're called ClearPath Robotics. They're one of my favorites. I love these guys so much. But I use them as a positioning example a lot. So they're robot guys. They have whatever degrees in robot science or something. Waterloo robotics engineers, mechatronics. That's what they are. Mechatronics engineers. And so they were doing all this stuff, and one of them's got an advanced degree, and they're doing. So they built robots for universities to build more robots. Like it was so meta. And so they're building robots, and they're selling these robots. But then eventually they got this idea for a robot that drives around a manufacturing plant and delivers things from one place to another. So they get this thing, they launch it, and they got a great marketing and sales engine. Like if you ever get a chance to go visit these guys, it's like worth looking at what they're doing because it's awesome. Anyways, so they're smart marketers and stuff, and they're cranking some leads. But they're noticing that when they get in to have a meeting with the person inside the manufacturing plant, they get in and say, hey, we're ClearPath Robotics, what we make are robots. And they were having this thing where everyone's like, robots, right? We got robots. I got robot vendors, right? And the minute you say robot, like manufacturers have been using robots for decades. And so when you say robot, what they think is nothing like what ClearPath does. What they think is a stupid arm that picks up a plastic bucket and puts it in a box. Like, and meanwhile, ClearPath guys have these things that drive around, and they've got mapping and sensors and artificial intelligence and all this shit that is fundamentally not robots, right? And so everything that's cool about them is not robot. And so they come in and say, we're robots. No, we're not robots. No, we're fantastic. No, forget about robots. We're this different, And so that's when you got a positioning problem. But did they start out making robots? Yes, the robot guys building robots. But the thing the thing they ended up with is not. So they're super smart. So they took a step back and they said, you know what, this robot positioning is not doing us any favors. And so they got thinking about it, and so if you're going to do a positioning exercise, this is how you do it. One, what is it that's awesome about you? So in their case, artificial intelligence, sensors, mapping, drives around. And then you say, okay, if I had to build a frame of reference where it was obvious that the thing does all that, would it be robots? No. So then you have to answer the question, what drives around, has sensors, is full of artificial intelligence, blah, blah, blah? Self-driving car. So maybe what we're selling is a self-driving car. And so they've repositioned the whole thing as autonomous vehicles for industrial uses. So now they go in and they say, hi, and they change the name. And so instead of being ClearPath Robotics, because that's all about robots, they're now Auto, O-T-T-O. So we're Auto Motors. You go to their website, it looks like a car website. And then they walk in and say, hi, we're Auto. And what we sell are autonomous vehicles for industrial uses. And everybody's like, that's fucking awesome. It's amazing. amazing, right? And everybody intuitively gets, right? It's an autonomous vehicle. Of course it drives around. Of course it has sensors. Of course it's full of artificial intelligence. Of course my robot vendor doesn't sell me that. Of course it's expensive. It's complicated, right? So all the comparables, the frame of reference, completely changes everything. And so this is a very frequent problem in startups because you start out building one thing, like we're like, what's a database? It's a database. What else could it be? We're so used to thinking about it as a database. What else could it be? But meanwhile, your customers are looking at it going, I don't know what that is, but it ain't a database. Right? And so if you don't do it for them, then what you're doing is you're literally dragging this ball and chain around with you. Just like, database, no, we're not a database, no, we're not, And so you have a problem if you ever get that, right? Like, you have a positioning problem if you're trying to pitch this thing and everybody's like, so, what is it again? Pitch it again. So you're like Siebel. No, we don't compare, Oh, you're like Facebook. No, we don't compete with Facebook. Well, something you said made everyone think it was a social network if they say that. Right? Then maybe you got to tell them right out of the gate, it's not a social network, it's this. But the question is, what's this? It's tricky. It's hard.
You're looking for something that obviously like excites someone. Like
Yeah.
when someone says, "Oh, you're like this." Well, not necessarily that you're similar to something, but you want some excitement when you pitch, obviously. Do you think that most of the time when you pitch and you get that comparison, that's less likely?
Well, so here's the thing. Nobody's going to understand your thing until you set the context for it.
So you do need
And
some
so
comparison.
you have to set some kind of context, but the best context setting you can do is where you say, this is the box I'm in, and the best thing I do is right in the middle of that box. And where you've got bad positioning is you say, this is the box I'm in, but this amazing thing I do is over here. It's kind of outside the box, or it's only a little in the box. That's when you got a positioning problem. Because everyone will say, oh, you're in that box. Obviously, you do this thing right in the middle. And you'll say, no, I'm not that thing in the middle. I'm over here. And that's where you have a problem. I'll give you another example. So I worked for this company. The one that got acquired by Siebel is called Janus Systems 100 million years ago. But we did CRM. And so our whole thing was we did enterprise CRM. Siebel does enterprise CRM. Siebel's got 2 billion revenue. We have 1 million in revenue. Siebel has 3,000 employees. 9,000 employees. We have 30. And, and we're going to beat them, damn it. And our product compared to theirs as a CRM was literally crap. Like it literally, if you had to do feature function comparison, they did all kinds of stuff that we didn't do. However, we had a fundamental difference in the way we modeled relationships in the CRM. And we knew it was different. We just weren't exactly clear who cared. So we had closed a couple deals. We were doing $1 million revenue. It's not like we weren't selling anything. But most of the customers that we pitched didn't think it was interesting at all. And almost every customer we pitched, we'd say, hi, we're enterprise CRM. And they go, oh, tell me how you're better than Siebel. And we'd say, well, we have this thing. And they're like, I don't even get what that thing is. Why do I need that? And then they'd say, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And we'd be like, nope, 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 nope. They had more customers than us, better brand than us, more money than us, more sales reps than us, just everything better than us. And so literally our positioning was, we are cheaper than Siebel because we are more willing to discount because we are desperate for cash. And so, we'd win the occasional deal that way, but it was always bad. So what happened was, eventually, we hired a sales rep, had a buddy at Goldman Sachs, gets us a sales meeting at Goldman Sachs. I tag along because I like to do that. And so my rep is pitching the thing to the guy from Goldman Sachs, and he's the head of investment banking. And he gets all the way through the whole pitch, and he gets down to the end where we show him this little relationship thing, the thing we have that Siebel doesn't have. The guy gets so excited. He's like, oh my God, so you're saying I can model this guy knows this guy, or this guy sits on the same board as this guy, and I can model that, these people belong to the same club, or this person would, oh my God, this is so exciting. And he got so excited, he ran down the hall, and he grabbed his two guys that worked for him and a guy that runs a different investment banking group. He's like, you got to see this thing. And he drags them all in. He's like, show them that thing. Show them the thing with the thing. And we're like, okay, so you can model the whatever. And that's fantastic. We've never seen a CRM that could do that. Yeah, actually, we're the only CRM that could do it. Wow, it's amazing. We close the deal, like instant. Whereas like normally our sales cycle is like 10 months. We close this thing in like 3 weeks. No comparison to Siebel, no on-site proof of concept, no like it's like a miracle. And that was a little deal, right? It was like 50 seats or something, but still. So we close this deal at Goldman Sachs, we're all excited. And then we're thinking, well, geez, do all investment bankers go batty when we show them this thing? Let's try it out. So, we close the deal at Goldman Sachs, so it's super easy to get a meeting with anybody else on Wall Street. So we go up and down Wall Street, pitch this thing, and we're like, hey, want to see this thing? And same reaction. Everybody's like, well, I'll lose their minds. Turns out, if you're an investment banker, this is actually fundamental to how you sell. But no other CRM could do it. And so were we a CRM? No, we were a shitty CRM. What we were was a really good CRM for investment bankers. So we just did a little tweak on the positioning. So we're just like, we're CRM for investment bankers. So the cool thing about that was we could go in and say, they'd say, well, so how are you better than Siebel? Siebel, we love those guys. They're fantastic. If you're a call center or a retailer or manufacturer or something, not you, investment banker, you need this. Look at this shit. And then you like pull this thing up and you'd say, look, we get investment banking. We got so good at this, right? So we all our data, our use case scenario, the demo we did, everything was very investment banking. And so we basically said, Siebel can have the rest of the market, all of it. They're great for everything else except you guys. And then we go in and say, ask your Siebel rep if he knows what a Chinese wall is. Ask your Siebel rep how he handles Chinese wall. We don't do it any different than them. But the Siebel guy doesn't know what a Chinese wall is because he sells to everybody, and this is probably the only time he's ever pitched an investment banker. So we go in, we sound smart, we look smart, right? We got smart data, we do a smart demo, and we just convince them, we know more about your business than you do. And so that little tweak in the positioning, we went from 1 million revenue to 70 million revenue in 18 months. Siebel acquired us for $1.8 billion, biggest software buyout in Canadian history at the time.
Yeah.
Never heard of it, right? Funny. People say, there's no big exits in Toronto. Bullshit.